Other rumblings this week that I want to talk about, and Suma, you mentioned this on your Twitter account this morning, which I woke up to because you're 5 or 6 hours ahead of me in Germany. But I've seen this in private chat groups as well. It's not being super publicly reported via any of the big Twitter personalities or anything like that. But there are a lot of rumblings in the sharper, semi-sharp betting community that Houston is considering passing on a quarterback at number 2. And I'll start with you, Suma. I want your overall thoughts on this because this hasn't been reflected in the betting markets yet. We have a lot of people talking about it, but the betting markets are still heavily favoring quarterback at number 2. So overall thoughts on the potential of the Texans passing on QB at number 2 and who you would think would be the most likely candidate to go to Houston at 2 if it weren't a quarterback.
Yes. So first of all, if there's going to be strong information that Houston is indeed going to pass on a quarterback, I will accept that. I will respect that. Okay, and probably look to somehow benefit from it. But my personal opinion, as of right now, and I don't think that the betting markets really disagree there, is that it would be completely insane if the Houston Texans punt on quarterback. I mean, they went 3-13, 4-12, 4-12, or 4-13 for 3 straight years. They finally got their head coach of the future who is going to bring, or is supposed to bring, new energy to the city. They have a top 10 offensive line. Laramie Tunsil, arguably the second best tackle in the league right now. Titus Howard is solid. Decent guard duo. They could use another center, but overall, in my opinion, this is a top 10 unit on paper. They signed Robert Woods and Dalton Schultz, 2 veteran options. They're getting some young guys like John Mechie, potentially back from his leukemia. New OC in town. I think you cannot enter training camp with Davis Mills and Case Keenum as your top 2 quarterbacks. I think it's a complete hard sell to the organization, to the fan base. It doesn't make any sense. If you look at the top of the AFC, like, the only way you are going to be able to compete in the near future in the AFC is when you hit on one of those quarterbacks. And the Texans are likely going to have the best shot right now, picking 2nd overall. And I also don't buy the narrative that they might trade down and then try to get their quarterback at like pick 7 or 9 or something. That also doesn't make any sense to me. Right now, I'm fully believing that the Texans are going to pick a quarterback at 2. And I might get proven wrong. That's fine. But anything else is basically bullshit to me right now.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. Now, I would say that it is logical or reasonable that if Houston theoretically has all these quarterbacks graded the same way, right? Which is very possible. I was hearing Eric Eager talk about this a little bit on Sumer Sports. Just the way that a lot of teams generally grading quarterbacks this year. There's no one that's separating themselves from the pack. I could see a scenario where they're at number 2 and it's like, okay, we have all these quarterbacks with the exact same grade. Why not try to trade down? I could see that being reasonable. What I don't see being reasonable is keeping the pick and drafting a non-quarterback. And I'm not sure what you think about that, Hitman, but I feel like that's entirely illogical.
Yeah, you read my mind on that. If they're not going to take a quarterback at 2, you absolutely have to trade down. And I know there was some talk it was somebody on Schefter's podcast said that the Texans gave Will Anderson a near perfect draft grade. I don't know how true that is, but you would have to have a defensive end to have a near perfect draft grade if you are going to stay at 2 and not take a quarterback. So I think that it makes total sense that if they don't want a quarterback at 2, that you have to trade out. And let's remember something. This isn't exactly the strongest draft. If you even listen to some talent evaluators talk about Will Anderson, they're like, listen, he's not Von Miller or right. One of these generational he's not Nick Bosa, one of these generational edge rushers. He really doesn't have the twitch that these guys have in the speed rush. Now he's more of a bull rusher, is what people have been saying. So it really doesn't make sense to stay there too and take a Will Anderson. So I know there's been steam on Will Anderson to go 2nd. I know there's been steam on Tyree Wilson to go 2nd, but I don't see it. I think that just logically, you either take a quarterback that you like it too, or you're going to trade out.
That makes sense. And John brought that up in the chat. What do you guys think of Tyree Wilson, number 2 overall market? Went from plus 2,500 to plus 700. And someone else in the chat, I missed it, but made up a good point. I mean, that literally could have been 3 bets. Doesn't take much for this market to move a 25 to 1. That could have been 3 bets.
I just don't see logically how, if you're Houston, you take Tyree Wilson at 2 instead of trading back to 4. I understand it's with the Colts, which is a division rival of yours. But if you really want to get a Tyree Wilson or Will Anderson, how do you not trade back to 4 or something like that and let the Colts get the quarterback that you deem isn't good enough, that you deem isn't a franchise quarterback? Let them get him, and then you go back to 4 and get one of these guys. So, yeah, I'm personally – some people mentioned to me like, oh, some stale Anderson and Wilson prices the other day, and it wasn't something that I bet, even at stale numbers.
Yeah. I did get a text this morning about Tyree Wilson. Rising fast per a couple of strong connections. I'm not going to let people know who sent this to me, but this is someone that I would typically value. If we look at the number 2 draft pick market, we see where it is right now. Tyree Wilson plus 700. The point I was going to make is I'd be more likely to take a shot on, if I really like Tyree Wilson and bought into this hype, I would take a shot on him to go top 5 when those markets are open everywhere rather than second overall pick, because I just don't think that the value is there at the second overall pick. I think it's extremely unlikely. So I'm with you guys on that.